Are you head or tail? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Think Future. My name's Chris Kalaboukis, and once again, we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. We're talking innovation, startups, the future. No, we're not. We're talking AI, startups, and the future. Not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. If you're watching on YouTube, smack that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can be notified when no show comes online. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast service, please subscribe and please drop a note on Apple Podcasts. I greatly appreciate it. Now, I asked you in the beginning, I said, are you head or are you tail? Now, you're probably tail because there's way more tail out there than there is head. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what do you mean, Chris? What are you talking about when you mean head and tail? Well, head and tail content was a concept that was put forward by Chris Anderson of what was this? He had some, I forget what his initial book was. The Long Tail, that's what it was called. And in this book of the Long Tail that he wrote ages ago, he made a comment about content. Now, the way content works is that there's always going to be more. There's always going to be more content. We're in a world where there's content, and there's content constantly being created every single second. Thousands and thousands of new videos, thousands and thousands of new podcasts, thousands and thousands of new books, texts, blog posts are being created. Millions. In fact, from the time I started this podcast to now, probably millions of new pieces of content were created. And these new pieces of content did not push out old pieces of content. No, they were added to the pieces of content that were already out there. Now, that means that the content grows exponentially. It continues to grow and grow and grow and grow, and there's no end to it. And the fact is that the old content is still there, and the new content is coming in, and it's not going to push it out, so it will always be there. There will always be more and more content. As time goes by, if you look on a time scale, there will always be more content. Now, if you think about it, if there's always constantly more content being created every single second, what happens to that content? How do we get to that content? How does that content become, get in front of you? Well, supposedly, Google and other search engines, although it's primarily Google because we hardly ever use anything else, constantly churn through all of this content that's being created, and they churn through the new content, they spider the new content, they look at it and they go, is this something that we should show to people? Because we can't just show everything to people. It's impossible to show everything to people. So what it does is it goes through certain algorithms to decide what am I going to show to people. And the stuff that's shown to people then gets liked and linked and commented on, and then eventually at some point it bubbles up above the other content, and some of it turns into head content. So it's the really popular stuff. And you're probably wondering, what are you talking about, Chris? Well, head content is actually very rarely comes up from the tail. Because if you think about it, this is tail content. There's plenty of user-generated content out there. Tons and tons of content being created all the time. But massive media companies like Disney and Fox and CNN and all those other media companies who have already been creating media, they created media prior to the internet age, and they're creating media now. And the thing is that if this media is the head media, it's got tons of money behind it, it's got tons of advertising dollars behind it, and what happens is that these companies that present media are practically paid to present that media. So you have to wonder to yourself, is it popular because it's Disney, or is it popular because Disney spent a hell of a lot of money getting that in front of people's faces so that they can see it? So the whole problem with head and tail content is that head content is okay, but tail content is from us, the regular Joes, people who are probably closer to the kind of thing that we're doing. And the example I like to use is skiing. So there's Skiing Magazine, which is head content, and they've created content, and their content is great. But if you look at the tail of skiing, there's thousands of skiers who have amazing blogs, amazing travelogues, amazing images, amazing videos, amazing podcasts that we may never see because there's so much head content that's being displayed on Google, we never get down to the bottom of the tail content, the really, really good tail content. Now, personally, I would love to see Google actually dig deep into the tail content and go, you know what? Some of this tail content is really good. Let's surface it so that people can see it. Connect the head content to the tail content. So if I'm a skier or if I'm into skiing, I would not only see the head content at the top, but it would bring in some of the most interesting stuff from the tail and present the tail to us. If you ask me, it would be great if we actually had a reverse search engine where we don't get any head content whatsoever, but we get all the stuff that's in the deep, dark ends in the far, far tail of the internet. That stuff is super, super interesting. It may not be head content, but I bet you anything it's something that you've never seen before. So the problem is like this. We get presented with tons of head content all the time, but the really interesting stuff is in the tail. And the problem is that a lot of these search engines don't give us the stuff that's in the tail. So startup founders, if you're out there and you're interested in doing something new and different, build an engine that surfaces the stuff in the tail, that takes all this content created by regular Joes like myself and actually presents it to people so that they can take a look at it, so they can see it, instead of it being stuck in the 6 billion results that Google gets. So it's unfortunate that that's where we're at. Most people experience the internet through these tiny little portals. They go to Google, they go to Facebook, they search for a few things, and then whatever the machines decide to present to them is what they're going to see. Are they going to go down to page 14 and see that awesome ski blogger talking about the latest descent down the mountain with pictures and all that stuff? No, they're never going to get there. They're never going to get there. So the challenge is, to startup founders, build a search engine that focuses on the tail. And for the rest of us who create tail content, figure out some way, I wish there would be some way that we would be able to get featured as much as the head content does in the world. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.